Okay, hello. I still have this lag issue that I'm running into, where it's like several seconds later from what I say to what appears on the screen. So I'm just going to try to get to the bottom of that. Sean gave me some advice last time. I tried it. I don't think it worked, and so I'm still in this sort of in this kind of lag zone. I'm getting a spinny disk also on my computer, which I don't know what to make of that. And now I'm suddenly losing concurrent viewers down to one. Anyway, maybe they'll come back. It's strange and perhaps inaccurate that I had. Oh, see, now I'm back up to a few. I think it's inaccurate when people just disappear and then reappear. I think that's probably not a thing that people are doing. That's a thing that a computer latency lag issue, sort of I don't know what I'm talking about kind of thing is responsible for. Anyway, hi Sean, hi Emily, hi everybody else. We'll talk about the Peter Sagal episode 7. With my old friend Peter. I'm not going to talk much about the Max Fun Drive. That's not why we're here. I'll give you just a little bit here at the beginning. It's going well. I didn't get a chance to set a goal for new donors before the whole drive started. And I kind of had a number in mind, and I found out today that we had already hit that number. So that's really great. And so we're building towards a stretch goal that I'll probably announce soon. But I'm gonna and it'll come with a special little thing with it. And I'm not telling anybody about it, but I'll tell you guys about it today because you're special. So if we hit a stretch goal number of donors, I'm gonna say if we hit that number, I will get a tattoo. I will get the following tattoo. So you know the comedy tragedy masks. You know, one smiling, one frowning. Comedy tragedy. I'm going to get one of these. Double tragedy. Why? Because I think it's funny. And I think that alone says a lot about what we're doing here. It'll look much nicer than this. I will need to find a tattoo artist who can do this, but make it look good and cool. I don't want this tattooed on my arm. And so, yeah, if you haven't joined on Max Fun Drive, please do so. You get the pin, little Depresh mode pin. You get the bonus content of the panel I did on TV writers and mental health with Rachel Bloom from Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. You get John Hodgman and I on a commentary track watching Destroy All Monsters. It's a lot of fun. So, Peter Sagal. So when I was first getting this, and this is a story I told on the old show on Hilarious World, but when I was first getting this idea off the ground and got approval to do a show where I interviewed people about depression, funny people about depression, it had just been it hadn't even been announced, but people knew what was going on in the public radio system. I was down in Chicago for a party. I don't know why I was all the way down there in Chicago, because I think my previous show had been canceled, so I don't know why they sent me there. But anyway, I was at this party, and Peter Sagal comes up and he says, "Hey, I hear you're doing this show about depression." I said, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, I want in." And I said, "No fair, you already have a show. Let the rest of us have shows. You have a hit show. You have one of the only hit shows ever in public radio." And he said, no, I'm depressed. And I said, "Really? Because I researched everybody I know, and there's nothing about you being depressed." And he said, "Yeah, that's because I've told nobody except for my doctor and you right now at this party after I've had a couple drinks." So, so I interviewed him for that show. And what happened with that one, that was our first episode. And we launched just before Christmas. I haven't talked about this before. We launched just before Christmas, and then Apple Podcasts, or iTunes Podcasts at the time, had us on their sort of featured tiles at the top. But between Christmas and New Year's, they just took that time off. And so usually those tiles stay up there for a few days, and ours was up there for like 3 weeks. So we got a lot of traffic, and we started to do really well because we timed it with some Apple laziness, I guess. So it was pretty awesome the way it worked out. That episode with Peter, though, was far and away the biggest, most popular show that we did, most popular episode we did on that old show, and because also people love him and are fascinated by him, and they want to tune in to hear what it's all about. Like he got an email from Terry Gross about it, and so it really, the word spread, and that helped us a lot. So I talked to a lot of people on that show on Hilarious World that I haven't brought back. Some that I already have, like Jenny Lawson, Mike Eagle. But with Peter, there was such a change in his life from how in the depths he had been when I first heard about his divorce. And that's what I talk about in the preface to this episode. Going out with him and just going out for drinks with a broken human, just somebody who had hit the bottom. And he was saying, no, I hit the bottom before. I'm already on my way up, but it sure didn't look like up to me. Or if it was on the way up from something, I shuddered to think about what the bottom must have been like, but it was horrible. Obviously, he talked about the idea of not being around anymore, and what that would be in the depths of this divorce and this depression that he had been kind of keeping at bay for a while. But the tragedies of life, or maybe not tragedies, but the ill fortune, the horrible events of life can bring that storming back. And it's tricky. The big challenge we faced in talking to Peter, and I faced it again in this episode, is how to talk about a divorce in a show when you're only talking to one party in the divorce, right? And so I don't know how much he would have been willing to really go into the particulars of the divorce. Like, I know he has his well-defined boundaries about that. But I needed to set up, as an interviewer, I needed to set up boundaries of my own, because if any claims as to what happened with any detail within the marriage or divorce got made, it would be the journalistically responsible way to handle that would be to go to his ex-wife and get her side of that story. And I didn't want to do that because that's not really the story I'm seeking to tell. So I'm seeking to tell the story of this guest's mental health journey. And so I was up against it again with this episode, and he didn't go into a lot of other details, and I very much, Ginger Rogers to his Fred Astaire. I let him kind of lead on that section, how much he wanted to divulge. He let pass that two of his daughters are grown now, and they are still not speaking with him, and that was that. And so yeah, it's a little dicey. I mean, fortunately Peter Sagal is a composed person who isn't going to make accusations, which makes it a little bit easier to do. I've had some interviews at other points in my career where a lot of things get said that can't be verified, and then you have to cut around them or kill the interview. And thankfully that wasn't the case here. I will say that I've noticed in listening back to this episode that I mentioned that he's my friend a lot. And I realized I did the same thing with Mike Eagle's episode and Jenny Lawson's episode. And it's true, because those people are friends. Like I would, if I had occasion to, I would spend time with them socially. Even though we live in different cities. I worry that I'm overusing that mention, that it's making it sound a little clubby, a little like hey, look at all my famous friends, or it makes it seem like this person and me are friends, and now I'll tell you about how great we are, and it separates me from the audience a little bit. I don't think it does yet, but I'm going to keep an eye on it and listen for it. Um, and So to me, this story, the one in this episode, is, and there was a mention on Facebook that I thought was really valuable. Somebody said that the whole episode kind of struck him wrong a little bit. It felt a little cavalier about his wife and kids from his ex-wife and his kids from his first marriage. It didn't strike me that way, obviously, or I wouldn't have put it out like that. But I thought it was a good note, and I really appreciated it. To me, the story that is told in this episode on Depresh Mode isn't about Peter forgetting his first family. It's about him coming to terms with that being broken and seeing that as not a thing in motion or a thing that he can fix heroically. Like several times when I've talked to him, he's gotten back around to Liam Neeson and those Taken movies where things are bad with a father and a daughter, and then she's in trouble with some sort of terrorists, and then he rescues her, and then that somehow repairs their relationship. And he talks about kind of waiting for the Liam Neeson moment in his own life so he can be the heroic hero father, and how that doesn't happen. That's just not a real thing. Liam Neeson's daughter wasn't taken. It's fake. And so to me, this whole episode is about him giving up on the Neesonness of that situation. And it's funny, like when Depresh Mode came out, we had our first episode was the Patton Oswalt one, and Peter Sagal commented on Twitter, like, I'm glad that they covered this idea of real life not being like the movies, and because it applied to Peter as well. And so I think it's a way of not getting into who was to blame for the dissolution of his first family, really, or at least from his role in that dissolution. It's more about just accepting that has happened and not taking the blame or not giving the blame. That's a separate issue, and not even speculating on whether it can be remedied one day or a new peace can be held. That's not even it. I think it's more about, here's a story of a guy faced with this terrible event and having to walk through it. I talked about this in the Patton episode, and I've talked about this in my own life with things that have happened to me. There's this idea of getting over it, or of the horribleness wearing off, or just that this will fade. You'll bust into the kidnapper's lair, and then you'll fix things. And it's not like that. Grief isn't like that. Trauma isn't like that. Mental illnesses aren't generally like that unless they're really chemically based and can be addressed as such. But we live in a story-driven culture. We talk about, it's our shared mythology, right? So we don't have Odysseus and we don't have the Iliad. We have the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Or, I'm from Generation X, so I keep saying Falcon and the Snowman, which is a Sean Penn, Timothy Hutton movie. Totally different thing. And so we have this idea that the hero goes on a journey, faces a crisis at the end, resolves it, and, things are back to normal, but in a new and better way. Not like that at all. I think that's what Peter was getting at. And he also talked about, and this was from he's used this metaphor a lot when I've talked to him about some of these issues. He's like, a person with I mean, one of the things he said was, that just cracked me up, was like, if you're depressed, you always have thought that you're horrible. And so sometimes you marry somebody who can confirm it for you, which was, I don't think that was unfair to his ex-wife, but I think the horribleness was just the horribleness of them being together ultimately. But he talked about this idea of a person with depression is somebody who makes a mountain out of a molehill. And then what do they do when they're faced with an actual mountain? What do you do then? But he's talked about the perspective being the gift of that. Like, no one would choose to go through horrible things, but you sometimes get perspective on. Peter's used the example of, well, if Ira Glass doesn't invite me onto his show, so what? You can spend years, especially in public radio, worrying about Ira's opinion of you. And then real life happens in a dramatic and horrible way. And you're like, oh, that never actually mattered, which is different. Like, gaining of perspective, I think, is different from comparison. So it doesn't work to just say, well, at least you're not starving in some tiny country across the ocean, because that doesn't help. It doesn't work as an abstract in a comparison. I think it only works from letting go of things rather than thinking about how much more horrible your life can be. So that's those are my thoughts mostly here on on the Peter Sagal episode. And having Jesse on to talk about Max Fun Drive was really great. I've known Jesse for so long, and we really only started to work together this year, which has just been so cool. It's like, that friend who, maybe, we'll work on something together one day. Well, in this case, it's like after 15, 20 years, it finally happened. If anyone has questions about the episode or what we're doing and with that, or even the Max Fun Drive, you can put them in the chat here. Oh, Abigail joined to get the pin for the new show. The pins are nice. The pins have little smiley, frowny faces, which is, of course, different from the upcoming tattoo, which has double frowns. I just, it, and plus I was in theater before, so that kind of works on that level. But mostly I just think double tragedy somehow equals comedy. Coming up on next week's show, I'll just see if anybody has questions here, and while they think them up or don't think them up, I'll mention that next week we have Zach Kornfeld of the Try Guys, who is the most famous person in the world, or somebody you don't know at all, depending on your walk of life. People who are fans of the Try Guys, TRY guys, look them up on YouTube, are fervent, are Beatlemania level of fans. My daughters are Beatlemania level fans of the Try Guys. That's how I first found out about it. And then they recommended I take a look at Zach, and his story was really cool, and we got in touch. And what happens in that episode, I think you'll enjoy it. I don't think I'm giving away too much here, but Zach talks about this quote, really, that he heard from Ira Glass, and how it changed his life and how it realigned his perspective on the work that he wanted to do. It's this really significant thing that Ira had said. And I don't really know Ira. I've talked to him a little before. We have a lot of friends in common. So I knew that if I invited him to come on the show, he'd at least know my name. So I did, and he just thought the idea was kind of funny. And so he doesn't usually say yes to a lot of those things, but he did for us. And it was really funny to me talking to Ira how the conversation didn't go exactly where I expected it to go. And it did feel a little bit like a This American Life story. So it started out on one topic, and then we'd make little discoveries and epiphanies along the way, and just have these little moments. And I think Gabe Mara, our producer, is on the chat here. Gabe, I think we left in the part where where Ira says, "Well, do you want to ask me about this?" That's if I were you, I'd ask me about this. and, and so, of course, if Ira Glass says, "Ask me about this," you're gonna. But I think we left in the part where he says, "If I were you, I would do this," because it was just so. It was so backseat driver of Ira Glass that I found it charming. Abigail asks, any chance you might interview comics artist and mental health advocate Ellen Forney? I have tried to interview Ellen Forney before. I never got very far. But I think she's really great. Like I'm from Seattle and she's done a lot of work there, but that's an excellent suggestion. She's got some really good thoughts. And so Gabe, let's run down Ellen Forney a little bit here. Was there pushback on the Peter Sagal episode recently? Thought I had seen someone. Oh yeah, I mentioned that earlier. Stacy, I think you're just joining us. I talked about that at the beginning. I think the criticism was that I don't know if the phrase was let him off easy, but that his redemption story didn't accurately reflect the damage behind him. And I think that's a legit criticism. I was sort of looking to where he is now compared to where he was from. I can't speak to the experiences of his ex-wife and his daughters because I don't know them. I've never spoken with them. And so I was trying to focus on, we know horrible things happened. We don't know the details. We just know that they were horrible. And then we're moving forward. And I actually think Peter was pretty rough on himself. Or not rough, tough on himself with a T. Was critical of himself, which I thought was good. Kate, let's see. Love the episodes. All of a sudden, yeah, thanks. How poor mental health contributed to the demise of his first marriage. No, I think Peter's going to be writing about his marriage in a very careful, cautious, approved kind of way. I don't know if it's an upcoming book, but I get the feeling he's working on something having to do with it. Ellen Forney went to high school with Peter Clowney, one of my best friends. That must have been in Philadelphia. Family is I admire shows that attempt to tell the entire story of a family and all the intricacies therein. I have heard it not work many, many times. I've heard it work on This American Life because they're total rock stars of the craft. But it's very, very hard. It's as hard as untangling a complicated family later in life. What is the story? How is the narrative shaped by the emotion? It's a very hard thing to do. I think that'll do it for today. I think Gabe and I have to dive back into some other stuff. It's exciting times, and we're here in the drive. If you haven't yet, please do go to MaximumFun.org/join. You could see the pin. You could contribute at a level that works for you. There was a question on Facebook: do we do one-time donations or is it all monthly? It is all monthly, and the reasons for that are long and complicated and probably not especially interesting, but that's the way that it is. That's the way that the Max Fun ship rolls. So that'll be it here. I'm still trying to fix this delay issue. So I see myself talking 7 seconds in the past. I'm on a very tiny, crappy time machine or tin machine. And Stacy, you could probably get in touch with somebody at Max Fun through that website. That's about all. I'm going to hang up now. No, you hang up first. No, you hang up first. No, you hang up first.